So last night at the hostel, I got into discussion with a threesome of Germans, which is always interesting. The worldview of young Germans is really the epitome of New Age. And we were talking about their views of the world and of God. They found out, of course, that I was a priest, and so they had all sorts of questions that they wanted to ask. And I think they wanted to ask the questions. In fact, I usually get this impression from atheists that they ask the questions because they want to easily verify their biases. They want a Christian to give a poor response, which sadly many Christians do, and thereby to write off Christianity and say, oh, look at how open-minded we are that we gave a hearing to this thought, and now we've swiftly dismissed it. Although, as the servant of God, Fulton Sheen, once said, most people don't reject Christianity because of what it is, but of what they think it is. And often that's the fault of Christians. Anyway, the discussion turned to the philosopher Baruch Spinoza, who in the 16th century was really a prophet, a forerunner of postmodernity. Spinoza was born in the Jewish ghetto in Amsterdam to a family that was originally from Portugal. Portugal. Sephardic Jews. They were Sephardic Jews in Portugal when the persecution of the Jews was going on by the Catholics in Portugal. And they originally apostatized from Judaism. They became Christians. They became Catholics. But then they changed their mind. They went to the Netherlands with a number of their brethren and reconverted back to Judaism because, of course, they never really intellectually accepted Christianity. And so, anyway, Baruch was born in this Jewish community, and I've got to think that the suffering of that Jewish community had something to do with his philosophy, although I don't know that he explicitly says it did. One of the oldest tricks that the devil has to work on us is to cause us to suffer and to scandalize us by that suffering and to make us believe that, God cannot be good, that he cannot hear our prayers, that, it's not worth to pray and that he can't be personal and yada, yada, yada. Well, anyway, Spinoza, you see that sort of mentality, although I don't know that he explicitly says that that's why he thinks what he does. But at an early age, as a young man in his 20s, he rejects Judaism. And at the tutelage of a heretical Jesuit, Franciscus von Auden, I think is his name, he basically leaves the Jewish faith, is actually excommunicated from the Jewish community. And he becomes a maker of optics for different devices, a lens polisher, but also writes a number of books, two of which were only published while he was alive, the rest of them published posthumously. But he's very influential in modern philosophy because he basically rejects the idea of God as personal. He is an early proponent of the idea of pantheism. It's a type of neo-paganism, this idea that God is everything, and that, he's very important to our life, but he's not personal. He's just existence, creation, yada, yada, yada. And there's no reason to talk to him or to pray to him because, of course, there is no him in him. And so I was having this conversation with these German young people, and I got the distinct impression that they, like Baruch Spinoza, didn't understand that the God that they don't believe in is a God that I don't believe in either. Many young people, I think, get this idea of God that's really a very pagan idea of God, anthropomorphic, God that is like man, and who reacts and who is, changed and things like that. And yet that's not what we believe about God. We believe that God is timeless. For me, I'm experiencing this moment, glorious as it is, with this beautiful vista. But for God, the beauty of this one moment is experienced outside of time, and so as part of a whole. And so while this place, obviously, as you can see from the topography, has changed, God sees it as it is at every time in history. And he neither suffers its destruction, because obviously at some point there was a rather large rock here, and the erosion of time created this little bay, and the bay is beautiful, but perhaps the previous rock structure is beautiful as well, and so he appreciates all the goodness outside of the time. There's no loss for him. There's no beginning or end. There's no before or after. And Spinoza's big problem is he rejects the idea of a God who is personal, because he doesn't think, it makes sense to pray to God, to ask him for things. And I agree, it doesn't make sense to ask him for things as if you're going to change him because he's perfect. We ask God for things because he's God, and because God is good all the time. And we don't hope to change him. At least a real Catholic who's thought intellectually about what it means to be God and what it means to be not God, that means being us. We ask things of him because that's what those who are in relationship, those who are love, do. But there's a presumption that he's going to give it to us. He's going to give to us what is good, just sort of like a child with a parent, right? The parent and the child, in our relationship, which presupposes the parent is going to give good things to the child. And sometimes the child asks for things that the parent had every intention to give in the first place. Yet it's good for the child to ask, because it's sort of the foundation of their relationship, of their love. I always find it annoying when I, intend to surprise either one of my nephews or nieces, or one of you guys, one of my students, with something, and then you ask me for it, because I want it to be a surprise. I don't want to tell you that I'm going to do what's good. I want you to, think that I was going to do something bad and then give you something that's good, so it, is all the more dramatic. Well, that's what prayer is about. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Maybe if you have a nephew, if you have someone who you love in a way that you want to give things to, that's how you can experience it, but we want to give those we love, particularly those who are inferior to us in the sense of, we have more ability than they do. We want to give them things that are good, and we like it when they ask for things, because it sort of confirms the goodness of the thing that we have every intention to give them anyway. Anyway, this is all very philosophical, and this video is getting a little bit long. We're going on 10 minutes here, but I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my discussion. It was really frustrating. I got to tell you, one of the things that frustrates me most is oftentimes when people get caught in corners. So we were talking about a lot of different things, and I was basically challenging them that they actually didn't believe that everything was God, because obviously, they were sitting on grass, and so, you ought not to sit on God. And so if the grass is God, then you ought not to sit on the grass and kill it. They probably ate cheese and meat and bread and all these things. If they're God, you probably ought not eat God unless he invites you to. I was challenging them a little bit, and we were talking about the differences between animals and humans, and the fact that humans are ontologically different and better, in a sense, than animals, because we don't just have our instincts, which most animals use, but we also have intellect, and intellect not just to make sort of simple connections, but to really abstract reality, to point towards beauty in the world and to reconstruct the world so that it's more beautiful and more useful. Anyway, and one of them threw out this claim about apes engaged in agriculture. It was really frustrating because I'd never heard of it, but it's possible. I mean, I don't claim to be a zoologist. I don't claim to be a biologist, and so oftentimes when you get into theological discussions with people, people will make physical claims about the world that no one at the time can verify, unless you want to be that annoying guy who goes to Facebook and tries to debunk it. But even then, I mean, like, Facebook isn't the ultimate authority. So having this discussion, they went to this strange argument. They said, "Oh yes, my professor is telling me about yada yada yada." Well, I went and did a research search after the fact, because I like to I'm open to different ideas, and so I did a ResearchGate search on different scholarly articles, and there were 3 articles about apes adapting to human agriculture, but no instances of apes engaged in agriculture themselves. And my only point was that human beings can abstract how creation works and then reorder it so that it works even better. And animals are really dependent on nature the way it is and sort of instinctually react to nature, but don't have that ability to abstract out of it the forms and the patterns of things, which simply points out the fact that human beings are different from apes. And although there is participation in the being of God in all things, from a rock to a piece of dirt to an ape, there's a hierarchy involved. And at the top of that hierarchy is perfect being, perfect truth, perfect goodness. And that's the being that we call God. And that's where Spinoza gets it wrong. Anyway, just an interesting little philosophical and theological discussion that I wanted to share with you as we looked at this beautiful view.